There we go. All right. Hey guys, I'm Alex. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Swingbyte, and it's really great to be here today. I'm actually from Chicago. We're based in Chicago, but this opportunity came up, and we wanted to get out here. So I'll just jump right in. The basic premise of Swingbyte is that sport enthusiasts, not just golfers, don't have access to convenient, affordable, and actionable performance data. And so that's what we do. Swingbyte is a motion capture system. We're starting off in golf, but the basic idea is that it's a set of sensors that capture motion. So I'm going to do a quick demo, and in classic demo fashion, I lost some data off my iPad, but hopefully it's recovered in the few minutes that I've been talking. Awesome. All right, so this is the Swingbyte app, and I'm going to try to find some data in here that doesn't look like my golf swing, because nobody wants to see my golf swing. So here's the basic idea. I take a swing, and actually, sorry. There we go. This is Swingbyte. It's a small little sensor you throw in a golf club just below the grip. And when you take a swing, you get this representation on your iPad, iPhone, or Android device. And so I can play it back and do with it basically all the things that you could imagine being able to do with something like this. So all the various data points throughout the entire swing, lots of historical data. And then all the swings that I take get sent to the cloud where I can review them later. What I'm trying to find right now is one of the things that Swingbyte lets you do is, in addition to, I'll just do it here, in addition to the 3D that you capture with the swing itself, we actually let you use the camera built into your iPad or iPhone or Android device and get side-by-side video of the person taking the swing. So I'm just going to point it this way. And so the basic idea is you throw the golf ball into that little circle, and when you take a swing, in addition to the 3D, you get the video side by side. So that's the basic idea. Let's just switch back real quick. That's the basic idea. And so I'm going to skip through the two demo slides that I have on here. So like I said, this is not just golf, but why did we start with golf? We started with golf because golf has awesome demographics. If you think about the average stereotypical golfer, they're kind of a gadget freak. And 1 in 5 guys play golf. On average, the average avid golfer spends $8 grand a year on all things golf. The average casual golfer spends $1,400. And so we figured it would be a great market to try it out with. We're selling it at $150. So we wanted people that weren't really concerned by that. So this being Hardwired New York, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we got here, because we've been in sales for about 1.5 years. So some of the lessons we learned along the way, some of the challenges that we ran through. But the first question is, how did this get started? Well, like most things, too much free time and SparkFun. Who here has heard of SparkFun? Show of hands. All right, so a handful. SparkFun is basically a hobbyist robotics website. If you want an easy-to-use board, if you want an Arduino, if you want a Raspberry Pi, you go there and buy a one-off. And so what I did is I was browsing, and I saw this little board. This was 2010. And what that is an Arduino, a 3-axis accelerometer, a 3-axis gyro, 3-axis magnetometer. It cost $130. I knew how to program for it. My background is software development and math. So I bought one, started playing around with it, and from that, we got Swingbyte 1. Swingbyte 1 was basically a minimal viable product. It was much uglier than this guy. Weighed about the same. It was basically an Arduino. So we took the board on the previous screen. We took a charging circuit also from SparkFun. We took their open source files, we spliced them together. You know about this, it's all kosher. We spliced them together. We wrote all the software that runs on there, and that was it. We got that thing off the ground and running. We got working prototypes for less than 50 grand. And then the plastic was pretty straightforward as well. So that's what we launched with in 2012, May of 2012. So in about 9 months, we sold tens of thousands of these, and it just went great. We were really happy with how it worked out. But in the process, it was a minimal viable product. So it was something that had issues, and we got feedback, and the thing twisted, and that was a mechanical switch. You can't see it under the battery right there, so if you hit it hard enough, it would just turn off. The USB port would break off, all sorts of fun stuff. So we took all of that and we made Swingbyte 2, and that's what this is. So Swingbyte 2, the last one was Arduino based, this one is ARM based. Doesn't really matter what that is, it's basically more industrial grade processing. We actually partnered with the Bluetooth guys, the guys that make the Bluetooth chip, and that thing in the bottom left there. And it's the same one on both. On the last one we had a Bluetooth chip with their ARM chip on it, and also their Arduino chip, which was really redundant. We talked to them and said, okay, we're buying enough of these from you. Let us put our code on there. And so let us do that. One less thing for us to worry about, better control, software power management, all sorts of things that you could possibly want. And then we also redesigned the housing to make it look better, to move the center of gravity down to the center of the club shaft as opposed to off to the side, so that when you take a real thin shot, it doesn't actually leave a divot. So had some success, still have some success. We're really happy with how things are going, but I don't want to spend too much time here because what I'm more interested about is, what are some of the things that we learned and what are some of the things that we have to focus on. When I started off, I said the basic premise is sport enthusiasts don't have access to convenient, affordable, and actionable data. And that actionable word is really important. Who here is not a golfer? Just give me one. There you go, sir. Is that a good golf swing?
I have no idea.
Exactly. And that's the problem that we need to solve. We have all of the data in the world, but if I just show this to an average golfer, or not even an average golfer, or not a golfer, it doesn't actually tell you anything. A decent golfer, or rather a person that spent some time with an instructor, or spent time for lessons, or spent money on lessons, would actually know what some of those numbers are, maybe would know what to do about them. But the basic thing is, the data just isn't enough. What we're looking at is that there's a difference between data and information. And Wearable Tech produces a ton of data. But so what? What do I do with it? And so the main focus for us, the main direction for us is to use the time that we've got, to use the data that we've gathered, and we've gathered quite a bit of data. This is in the millions, this is total swings recorded on the Swingbyte platform, uploaded. And actually make something sensible out of it so that I can go back to this, and rather than showing this, I can go to you and say, hey, that's actually a pretty decent shot. Your face-to path is 6 degrees open. That means your ball is starting off straight and curving a little bit to the right. It's pretty good if that's what you want, but here's what you should do. And then play a video for you that tells you, well, this is what you should do. Okay. Let's talk about some of the things that we've learned. Swingbyte launched before Indiegogo and other companies that remain nameless in this space was really a thing. We launched in 2010, so we had to raise money the traditional way. And so, actually I'll come back to this one. We'll start with this one. For hardware startups, cash is king, even more so than the average startup. So I couldn't resist throwing a chart up there, I'll explain what this is. Suppose you make a software as a service, and it costs you, or you sell a license for 150 bucks a pop. And somebody comes in and says, I want 10,000 licenses. Awesome. So when you wake up after partying, you realize that you just made $1.5 million. That's great. Now, same thing happens to a hardware startup. You gotta get a little bit more specific here. So it costs you 50 bucks to make one, you sell it on average for 200 bucks, which means that you're retailing it for probably 300 bucks. Somebody comes in and says, hey, I want 10,000 of these things. Well, things get a little bit more complicated. So let's say you have really favorable terms. These are round numbers, not Swingbyte numbers, but pretty reasonable numbers. You have a line of credit that gives you 11% interest. You have 15 days payable when you place an order. You have 45 days receivable when you get paid, and it takes 6 weeks for something to get made. What that means is you got that order week 0, really. You're out $500,000 week 2. You're accruing interest, and week 12, you finally get paid. Now, if you don't have a line of credit, and you haven't raised enough money to be able to finance this sort of thing, you're kind of screwed. You can't actually take this on. So, one thing, I really should have made this number 1, for a hardware-based startup that's just getting going, take all the money that you can, and then get some more. Just because this will kill you. This limits how fast you can grow. All right. Sensors, because we are a sensor-based company, not everybody here is. But sensors themselves are a commodity. This thing, it's a commodity sensor that we pulled off a shelf and threw some plastic on it. So this thing isn't what your business is. If it's easy for you to build, it's easy for somebody else to build too. Our example was we launched so I started working on this in 2010. We launched, debuted in January 2012, launched in May of 2012. By October of 2012, and we were the only ones at that point. By October of 2012, there were 5 other companies making something similar. The big differentiator is what our app does, the video functionality, and where we're looking to go, the kind of analytics that we're looking to build and what we're looking to do beyond just golf. But the sensor itself, that's just a means to an end. This is a big one. Iteration is important. We've grown up hearing how important iteration is. You want to get a new version of your website out there as quickly as possible, every day, every week, whatever it is. That's also true for hardware, but it's really expensive. So some of the things that you don't have to worry about if you release a version with a software system, you may get some angry customers, but if you broke something or if they don't like a new feature. But the only thing that you're spending is that sleepless night or sleepless week of you building the new version. With hardware, here's what you're spending. You're spending time on design, and with hardware, you're talking about an industrial engineer, industrial designer, electrical engineer, somebody to finish the prototyping and all the molding. You're talking about making tooling changes. Sometimes it's just a tweak, sometimes it's a whole new mold, for example, for plastic. An injection mold costs about 15 to 20 grand for one part. You're talking about inventory. So if you're releasing a new version, it may be whatever you have in inventory because people don't want to buy old stuff. It may be whatever components you have in inventory if you made a change where you can't use some components anymore. And then another big one is, the second you make an announcement that a new version is coming, nobody's buying the old one anymore. Nobody here is Apple unless I'm missing something. And people aren't going to continue to buy your iPhone 5 while you've already announced your Apple 5S. We made that mistake, and that costs us money. So basically, the second you announce it, everybody's going to stop and wait for the next one. And then the last one that we learned is that good PR is better than advertising. Again, the software hardware analogy. For software, you have the opportunity to give somebody a month free or give somebody a limited feature version of the app until they try it out, and then they're willing to spend money. You have the best system out there, that's great, they tried it out, they like it, awesome. Hardware, that's not the case. I have to take away 150 of your hard-earned dollars. And so if you see a spot on TV, you know that it's paid for. If you see a guy on TV hawking your product, you know that it's paid for. So you may remember what it is, and it's great for brand building. But in terms of actually getting somebody to convert, I mean, it converts, sure, but nowhere near as well as you think that it does. So for us, and again, this may be more for us than others, but for us, good PR has worked a lot better than advertising has. So we're working with a PR firm, and they've gotten us in front of magazines, and they've gotten us in front of people in the industry and all sorts of things. And then rather than a paid advertisement in the golf magazine or Golf Digest or whatever, it's an article that talks about it, that looks at it, that it gives a review. And so it creates a base of information so that when somebody sees some kind of advertising, goes out looking, there's already a lot of other information that's editorial as opposed to paid for. So there's a big difference there, and when people are making those purchasing decisions, they may not be thinking about it consciously, but it's certainly there. So that's all I had. And rather than keep talking about stuff like this, I thought I'd just open it up for questions. Yes?
So when did you make the step of going from having a prototype?
Start with your name and company.
Oh, sure. My name's Devon. I'm a web developer. And
I've been fooling around Carolina. And so when did you make the step from going from a wired thing to your computer to a wireless prototype?
Actually, that was pretty early on, and again, I give a lot of credit to SparkFun. They didn't do anything for us explicitly, just the things that they have. It costs $30 to buy a thing that plugs onto those 6 holes and makes it Bluetooth on SparkFun specifically. So that's one of the, there's different websites. There's Lady out of New York and a bunch of other different websites. But there's an ecosystem of these interchangeable parts that you can prototype with. They're certainly more expensive than anything you do in production. But you know, this was 130 bucks. A USB module was 10 bucks. A Bluetooth module was 30 bucks. And actually, the first versions of Swingbyte 1, we used a different Bluetooth module, and it was the one that we bought. We actually reached out to the company that provided that developer module, started going down a path with them. It didn't work out for performance reasons, but the first ready-made versions of Swingbyte were based on that. Go ahead.
Hi, Robert Castillo. How do you think about your business going forward in terms of the new services you would offer? For example, is there a way that as a user they can have somewhere in the cloud a coach where their data goes to the coach who use the information, it's got to be a trusted source and all these other kinds of things?
Sure.
And how does that, when you think about the business model around that, how does that make sense? Where are kind of problems that you see there? I'm really curious because that seems to be kind of the obvious next step for anybody like, why would I coach look at this? Because I have no idea what this data is saying, or I have some idea of it.
Sure. So the whole student-teacher thing has been big for us from day one. Again, you know, we raised a little bit of money, but not like a huge round. So for us, it was important to be, you know, we couldn't just go out and buy $2 million worth of TV time. So what we focused on is getting the teachers to buy in so that they would evangelize the product to their students. And so that's the direction that we started off in. And we already have some functionality along those lines where students and teachers can share back and forth both the 3D and the video. But to your point of a longer term thing, you know, the things that I can't talk about, that's definitely something that we're looking to do. We already have some partnerships in place where, you know, we're the official swing analyzer for Golf Digest schools, stuff like that. So we have those partnerships in place. Part of it is figuring out where this market as a whole is going, whether or not we want to, what piece of it we want to play in. So there's already a lot of platforms popping up that try to facilitate the student-teacher thing. And right now we're providing data into it. So we need to figure out whether or not we want to be our own platform or want to be a data provider. So we have some thoughts on that, but that's kind of the general direction.
Nice.
Yep. Yes, back there.
Hi, Jeff Green. Two quick questions, one technical and one more business in nature. On the business side, I noticed that Nike owns a lot of sports patents, particularly in the golf realm. And I know they have one on swing devices. Curious to see if that's affected your business and sort of how you feel about that going forward.
Sure. Certainly something we keep an eye on. The basic premise of this is an accelerometer and a gyro strapped to a moving object. That's been around since the 60s. Actually, the guys that wrote the map for us, we have a development team that works for us in Russia. I'm Russian myself, hence the Russian connection. And we brought in two professors, and they used to design guidance systems for Russian ICBMs. That's where the algorithms for this sort of thing came from. And back then, they didn't use MEMS technology. They used actual, I'm completely blanking on the word, but physical gyros. So that's definitely something we keep an eye on, and we're very diligent to make sure that we're not running afoul of anybody's patents. We've looked at what Nike does. We think we're in the clear, or rather our patent attorney thinks we're in the clear. So it's something that we have to keep an eye on. It's one of the reasons that we also look at building out proprietary technology, like the image functionality or the video functionality that has some pretty sophisticated image recognition stuff built in and so on.
Thanks. So the second question ties into the first, I guess. I'm wondering if there's a lot of calibration that a user has to do when they attach this to their club with respect to how high up on the club, whether it's pointing north away from them as their position, or if you can sort of get rid of all of that using gravity vector or something like that with the accelerometer.
Sure. So there's not a whole lot of calibration per se. What you have to do, and I don't know if you can see it from back there, there's a white line running down the USB cap. So you put this on a golf club, like this. So it's at the 12 o'clock position. All you have to do is make sure this white line is facing straight up or is aligned with the leading edge of the club. And that's the only calibration you have to do. Once in a while, the software detects that there's an issue and says, hey, I want you to recalibrate. What that means is it asks you to put the club on the ground, step away, and hit a button. 30 seconds later, it's good to go. In terms of using the gravity vector to figure that stuff out, you can do that, but that's not enough variables to actually define everything. So you don't know which way things are oriented then.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Time for just one last quick one.
Are you thinking about Aditya from Red House? Are you thinking about other sports where you can analyze swing, like baseball or tennis, something about self-classes swing?
Sure. We are thinking of next sports. So one of the reasons we started off in golf, in addition to the economic one, is that golf is, as far as I know, the only sport where you start off in a stationary position. The ball doesn't move until you hit it. And then you return after your swing to the same exact spot or at least the goal is to return to the same exact spot. It doesn't always happen that way. So that made it easy from a biometric and physics standpoint as well. It's just a lot easier to make certain assumptions about golf swing. That's why we started there, but we're certainly looking at other sports. You know, we're not looking at all sports. We're looking at sports where there is a moving sports thing, be it a bat, a racket, a stick, whatever it is, and sports where there are discrete motions. But we certainly are looking at others.
Cool, thank you very much.